Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our deep dive into The Handmaid's Tale. Now, fiction has a potent effect on culture. Whether it's Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, The Sopranos, The Godfather, Scarface. I mean, it's unlimited how much fiction gets into the minds of people and creates trends. Okay? The Handmaid's Tale is one that has made its rounds to quite a number of women, and mostly of the American or Western liberal persuasion, and the author herself is against Islam, pro-J, against Christianity, and is a feminist, okay? So, I have also shared with you, excuse me, on the community tab, several times, where politicians are referencing The Handmaid's Tale when they criticize people on the right. Okay? So it's important for us to dissect this text. This is the first one. There's a second one I've also already finished, which I plan, inshallah, to put on the channel. But it's important for us to dig deep into these texts, because what I've noticed is there's a show, which I haven't seen, they'll often not read the books fully, watch the show, and then use that to do political commentary. But now that I've dissected this book, I'm able to engage about it to the point where I can really see when someone hasn't read it and they're just fear-mongering over nonsense. Okay, let's begin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We're in part 25. There's a section here I wanted to share with you, which I think highlights how this book really dips into psychology. Let's begin. Bismillah. What I heard first the next morning was a scream and a crash. Cora, dropping the breakfast tray, it woke me up. I was still half in the cupboard, head in the bundled cloak. I must have pulled it off the hanger, and gone to sleep there. For a moment I couldn't remember where I was. Cora was kneeling beside me. I felt her hand touch my back. She screamed again when I moved. "What's wrong?" I said. I rolled over, pushing myself up. "Oh," she said, She thought what? Like, she said. The eggs had broken on the floor. There was orange juice and shattered glass. So, here, she thought she was dead. She thought she had deleted herself from the cosmos. Because if you recall, the handmaids, they have this habit of doing that to themselves. And our main character, remember, when the text first opens, she thinks about taking a shank, right, from the kitchen. Now, it's important to, let me give you an example. There's an American Primeval show on Netflix. 2 Moons steals a knife and uses it to shank the man who's been R-wording her. And so, in cinema, you will see women using a shank to use it against a male person who's making them feel very uncomfortable. And these handmaids, they did choose to become handmaids, but they don't exactly like their position, so they can use their shank on themselves or on others. Okay? So, you have to understand, in this fantasy world, the Marthas, and Cora is a Martha, they understand, hey, this is what those handmaids do, and it's traumatizing for those who have to discover it. And that's why she was freaked out. The eggs had broken on the floor. There was orange juice and shattered glass. "I'll have to bring another one," she said. "Such a waste. What was you doing on the floor like that?" She was pulling at me to get me up, respectively, to my feet. I didn't want to tell her I'd never been to bed at all. There would be no way of explaining that. I told her I must have fainted. That was almost as bad, because she seized on it. "It's one of the early signs," she said. "Please." That, and throwing up. She should have known there hadn't been time enough, but she was very hopeful. So, early signs of pregnancy. I've never heard someone fainting because of pregnancy, but nauseous. And again, you can see how the character Cora wants a child in the home real bad. "No, it's not that," I said. "I was sitting in the chair. I'm sure it isn't that. I was just dizzy. I was just standing here and things went dark. It must have been the strain, she said, of yesterday and all. Takes it out of you. She meant the birth, and I said it did. By this time I was sitting in the chair, and she was kneeling on the floor, picking up pieces of broken glass and egg, gathering them onto the tray. She blotted some of the orange juice with the paper napkin. I'll have to bring a cloth, she said. They'll want to know why the extra eggs, unless you could do without. She looked up at me sideways, slyly, and I saw that it would be better if we could both pretend I'd eaten my breakfast after all. So here you can see the questioning, like, why do you need more eggs? You can see that things are accounted for, and things are heavily observed. Okay? Now remember, Gilead is going through a war, so rations are not very, very high, and eggs are costly, and orange juice is costly because oranges are a rarity, which is why you see me make a lot of orange jokes, especially mandarin orange jokes. So this whole, like, I don't want to get in trouble because I dropped the tray, but you scared me, so it's your fault. But if I tell on you, then you're on the floor, then we both get in trouble, you see? I'll be like, remember, the handmaids want to also be seen as healthy. If they're suspected of being sick, this could, cause them some problems. Okay. So, there's that. There would be too many questions. She'd have to account for the broken glass in any case. But Rita would get Shirley if she had to cook a second breakfast. I'll do without, I said. I'm not that hungry. This was good. It fit in with the dizziness. But I could manage the toast, I said. I didn't want to go without breakfast altogether. And if you think about how much they're limited, food does become a sort of highlight of their day. It's been on the floor, she said. I don't mind, I said. I sat there eating the piece of brown toast while she went into the bathroom and flushed the handful of egg, which could not be salvaged, down the toilet. Then she came back. I'll say I dropped the tray on the way out, she said. See that? So it's like, instead of saying, oh, I dropped it because so-and-so was laying on the floor, and I thought she was dead and she freaked me out. Instead, I'll just say that I dropped it on the way out. So still, Cora is going to risk getting in trouble for our main character. Think about how kind that is. She's going to be taking all the blame. She could say the truth and be like, that dumb handmaid was laying on the ground, freaked me out, and I spilled the tray. It was her fault, which it was. But you see Cora's good nature. It pleased me that she was willing to lie for me, even in such a small thing, even for her own advantage. It was a link between us. I smiled at her. I hope nobody heard you, I said. It did give me a turn, she said, as she stood in the doorway with the tray. At first I thought it was just your clothes, like, then I said to myself, what are they doing there on the floor? I thought maybe you'd run off, I said. Well, but she said, but it was you. Yes, I said, it was. And it was, and she went out with the tray and came back with a cloth for the rest of the orange juice. And Rita that afternoon made a grumpy remark about some folks being all thumbs. So Rita is kind of more of the grumpy character. All thumbs means like you're clumsy. You're not very hand-eye coordinated. So if someone's all thumbs, you're like, crazy. Too much on their minds. Don't know where they're going, she said. And we continue on from there as if nothing had happened. That was in May. Spring has now undergone. The tulips had had their moment and are done, shedding their petals one by one. Like teeth. Baby teeth, One day I came upon Serena Joy, that's the commander's wife, that's like her boss, kneeling on a cushion in the garden, her cane beside her on the grass. So here you can see a little bit of the oldness and feebleness of Serena Joy. She was snipping off the seed pods with a pair of shears. I watched her sideways as I went past, with my basket of oranges and lamb chops. She was aiming, positioning the blades of the shears, then cutting with a convulsion jerk of the hands. Was it arthritis creeping up? or some blitzkrieg, some kamikaze committed on the swelling genitalia of the flowers. The fruiting body, to cut off the seed pod, is supposed to make the bulb store energy. So, has a cane, arthritis, heavy chain smoker. Saint Serena on her knees doing penance. See how she mocks Serena? What has Serena done to her thus far? Nothing really that bad, you know. But the animosity our main character has towards, you know, her, shall we call her, it's her commander's wife, but I can't say her master's wife. But the evil eye she gives her. And now also the way she mocks other women and then looks up to Moria. It's really quite strange. I often amuse myself this way, with small, mean-minded, bitter jokes about her, but not for long. It doesn't do to linger, watching Serena Joy from behind. What I coveted was the shears. Exactly, you see what I just said? Another line of coveting a weapon. You see? Okay? What I had just mentioned earlier, she mentioned, you know, knives in the beginning. Here, she's mentioning shears. Gardening shears. Very, very, violent. But remember, she said she amuses herself by being mean-minded. So, when you see me being a little bit harsh on our main character, understand she's kind of a cunt. Well, then we had the irises, rising beautiful and cool on their tall stalks like blown glass, like pastel water momentarily frozen in a splash, light blue, light mauve, and darker ones, velvet and purple. See, so here she goes into a very distinct type of descriptor paragraph. She gives us descriptors of the scenery, which, you know, helps us to imagine what it is she's looking at. I'm not going to read all of it, that part, because it's a bit, you know, there's no point. Okay. Also, she goes on, the commander and I have an arrangement. It's not the first such arrangement in history, though the shape it's taken is not the usual one. I visit the commander 2 or 3 nights a week, always after dinner, but only when I get the signal. The signal is Nick. If he's polishing the car, when I set out for the shopping, or when I come back, and if his hat is on askew, or not on at all, then I go. If he isn't there, or if he has his hat on straight, then I stay in my room in the ordinary way. On ceremony nights, of course, none of this applies. Okay, so here you can see the commander. He's started, you know, we learn more about him later, but they're prone to break the rules. Okay? And then they're the ones who are supposed to be upholding the rules. But he's not allowed to meet with his handmaid in this way, and he's created an elaborate system that his wife doesn't perceive in order to play Scrabble or that word game with handmaid, you know. The difficulty is the wife, as always. After dinner, she goes to their bedroom, from where she could conceivably hear me as I sneak along the hall. Although I take care to be very quiet, or she stays in the sitting room, knitting away at her endless angel scarves. So, knitting is a very humble habit. Keeps the hands busy. And the angels, they're kind of like the secret police in a weird way. They are tough, and they're not very angelic-like. But we don't know if the scarves actually go to them, but the wives make them for them. So she has a cane, she has arthritis, she knits scarves, and the handmaiden is betraying her by going and breaking the rules with the commander. Turning out more and more yards of intricate, useless wool people from her form of procreation, it must be. So see, her form of procreation, you see how she mocks her for being unable to have children? So she's making, and she says useless wool people. Useless. So she degrades that lady's hobbies as useless. Even though She probably, if the handmaid was allowed to knit, she'd probably really enjoy being able to knit as well. And she wouldn't feel it was useless because she would feel she's able to do something productive with her time. But instead, she just likes putting other people's hobbies down, even if she secretly wishes she could do them herself. Because she doesn't see the wife's position as all too detrimental. I mean, they do get some perks, but there's rules for them as well. The sitting room door is usually left ajar when she's in there, and I don't dare go past it. When I've had the signal, but can't make it down the stairs or along the hall past the sitting room, the commander understands. He knows my situation none better. He knows all the rules. You see? He knows the situation he's putting his handmaiden in. He knows all the rules. He's breaking them. He ain't being strict. Sometimes, however, Serena Joy is out, visiting another commander's wife, a sick one. That's the only place she could conceivably go, by herself, in the evenings. She takes food, a cake or pie or a loaf of bread baked by Rita, or a jar of jelly. See, this is very Amish, very loving. Someone came to visit me with some cake or pie or a nice baguette, or some nice raspberry jelly. Hello, thank you. Made from the mint leaves that grow in her garden. Imagine homemade mint jelly. That goes well with lamb. Oh, delicious. They get sick a lot, these wives of the commanders. It adds interest to their lives. Well, they are going through a bit of food scarcity at times. But in the second book, one of the wives was given rat poison by her husband. So, as for us, the handmaids, and even the Marthas, we avoid illness. The Marthas don't want to be forced to retire because who knows where they go. You don't see that many old women around anymore. And as for us, any real illness, anything lingering, weakening, a loss of flesh or of appetite, a fall of hair, a failure of the glands, we would be terminal. I remember Cora, earlier in the spring, staggering around even though she had the flu, holding onto the door frames when she thought no one was looking. Being careful not to cough. A slight cold, she said when Serena asked her. Serena herself sometimes takes a few days off, tucked in bed. Then she is the one to get the company. The wives rustling upstairs, clucking and cheerful. She gets the cakes and pies, the jelly, the bouquet of flowers from their gardens. I mean, that's pretty loving. Who wouldn't want that? Well, just because you don't get it don't mean that you should let petty jealousy take the best of you. I would love for someone to visit me with some flowers and jelly. They take turns. There is some sort of list, invisible, unspoken. Each is careful not to hog more than her share of attention. On the nights when Serena is due to be out, I'm sure to be summoned. Now you see how sneaky that is? From the husband's part and from the handmaid's part. And on my view, you can feel sorry for Serena Joy. The first time I was confused. His needs were obscure to me, and what I could perceive of them seemed to me ridiculous, laughable, like a fetish for lace-up shoes. Also, there had been a letdown of sorts. When had I been expecting behind that closed door the first time? And then she mentions here, like, BDSM stuff, which is typical feminist writers. They don't like heterosexuality and masculinity and alpha male syndrome, they call it, but in their books they always talk about whips and other things like that, which she does here as well. So, and then she even uses the word, it would be kinky, but instead she's playing Scrabble. So the author here has made our character be like, well, I expected some sexual deviancy. And as a reader, you expect it to be as well. But Scrabble is a boring game. But later, he gets a piece of the pie from her, as they say, and you see how deviant he really is. I thought he might be toying some cat-and-mouse routine. But now I think that his motives and desires weren't obvious even to him. They had not yet reached the level of words. Now remember, she's in her 30s. She's kind of already in her decline, coming towards what some would call the wall. You know, she's not a 22-year-old. She's in her 30s and had kids before. A kid. But, not like she's some supermodel. But she's attractive enough compared to the feebleness of his wife. So again, just to me, a fictional example, just to highlight even feministic knowledge, inadvertently and indirectly, through implication that men are polygamous by nature, right? They have an old wife, she's got medical problems, and there's someone who is still a bit firm, bouncing around the house. They're gonna try to chase the cheese. The second evening began in the same way at first. I went to the door, which was closed, knocked on it, was told to come in, to follow the same two games with the smooth beige counters, prolix, quartz, quandary, syllab, rhythm. All the old tricks with consonants I could dream up or remember. And so then she talks about how they play that game. And so he talks about being able to let her use the dictionary, that he would let her win sometime, okay? And they would get very comfortable. Now he tells her, I have a little present for you, he said. He smiled a little. Then he pulled open the top drawer of his desk and took something out. He held it a moment, casually enough, between thumb and finger, as if deciding whether or not to give it to me. Although it was upside down from where I was sitting, I recognized it. They were once common enough. It was a magazine, a woman's magazine. It looked like from the picture a model on glassy paper. Hair blown, neck scarf, mouth lipstick, the fall fashions. I thought such magazines had all been destroyed. So here, do you remember how... I'll put another one here. Book burnings. Now, this one is a very clever insertion in this dystopian book that she has written. Because Christians have done book burnings historically. And it's recorded that the book burnings that Hitler did in Germany were about transgenderism, homosexuality, you know, stuff that they contend the Jays were writing, because the first transgender clinic was in Germany by the Jays, I believe. I think they would have been considered ethnic Jays, not religious Jays, but there was an interview, the black trans, the dude cosplaying as a woman who played in Orange is the New Black, he was being interviewed, and he mentioned this himself, that he thanks Jewish people for creating transgenderism as an acceptable lifestyle, and that Jews have something about the different genders, 8 different genders, or I forget how they phrased it, but something in the Kabbalah, or I forgot. But Hasidic Jews, I think, are different than some of the Talmudic Jews. So there's these different factions. But either way, this trans mentioned that. So the fact that this author has made her book about it's like Hitlerian-esque in vibe, and she's included magazine burning, which hints at book burning, and how some of the men kept those materials anyways. It's like you're meant to see like a hero, like, oh, he saved this magazine. And then if you look deeper into this, these magazines make women more insecure and make men have lust. So it would make sense that in Gilead they would get rid of such material where lewdness is promoted, vanity, pomposity, and decadence, when they're trying to have a more minimalistic, monastic life, even some of them, right? So today we have conservatives who will ban the rainbow books from schools, and the left-wing blue-haired freaks, they will say things like, oh, you know, why would you do such things? But my kid had a bookmark, and it said, stop banning books. She got it from the school library. I went into the website. I looked up what books it was saying not to ban, and some of them were graphic books on anal stuff like that. It was not a joke. I saw it for my own self. So if someone like Vosh or Kyle Kalinske is telling you this doesn't happening, they don't prove those kind of books. No, I saw that with my own eyes, and I asked my kid, "Why do you have this? Why do you have this bookmark?" She said it had superheroes on it, and I was like, "Oh." But if my kid would have typed it into the search bar and went and looked, she would have saw something very disgusting and degenerate. But these people put it in like a cartoon fashion, so they feel like it's okay. If you look up city council meetings where parents read aloud from these books, like "This book is gay" is one of them, you can be like, why not teach kids about real estate, water filtration, taxes, hunting, sewing, useful things? But no, they get these filthy pornographic ideas into the kids' heads at a young age. And then they get mad when conservative Christians and Muslims ban such material, right? So when a feminist liberal in her book is saying, "I thought such all magazines have been destroyed," you see what she's really getting at, what she's hinting at, what she's pulling from. She's pulling from historical examples and modern examples of book burnings, and a magazine is a type of book, you know. And if you hear like Steven Crowder, he's made jokes about the very first thing he choked the chicken to was the Victoria's Secret magazines, and the Sears catalog used to have like just women in bras. And so conservative Christian males will joke about their first experience was with the Sears catalogs. But today, young lads have access to even worse, unfiltered, which is heartbreaking. So, banning magazines isn't something like ones that feature just women. There was the one like Lowrider magazine, women on cars. Vogue is still very sensual. You know, it makes sense. Makes sense. But here was one left over in Commander's private study, where you'd least expect to find such a thing. So that's the cleverness that she's pointing at the hypocrisy. The Commander is supposed to keep the rules, and he's sneaking about the rules. He looked down at the model who was right side up to him. He was still smiling, that wistful smile of his. It was a look you'd give to an almost extinct animal at the zoo. Staring at the magazine as he dangled it before me like fish bait, I wanted it. I wanted it with force that made the ends of my fingers ache. At the same time, I saw this longing of mine as trivial and absurd, because I'd taken such magazines lightly enough once. I'd read them in the dentist's offices and sometimes on planes. I bought them to take to hotel rooms, a device to fill in empty time while I was waiting for Luke. After I'd leaf through them, then I would throw them away, for they were infinitely discardable, and a day or two later I wouldn't be able to remember what had been in them. So she's kind of just highlighting how when something is abundant, you don't value it. When something's scarce, you value it. You know, which is something I think we all can relate to. Okay. It's an old one, he said, a curio of sorts from the 70s. I think of Vogue. See, I mean, yeah, exactly. I underlined Vogue. But it's like Vogue has that type of aura to it. This, like a wine connoisseur dropping a name. I thought you might like to look at it. So, from the 70s. Old. I hung back. He might be testing me to see how deep my indoctrination had really gone. It's not permitted, I said. And here it is, he said quietly. I saw the point. Having broken the main taboo, why should I hesitate over another one? Something minor, or another, who could tell where it might stop? Behind this particular door, taboo dissolved. Now see that? So the Commander is supposed to maintain all the taboos, but he's leading her astray. If you recall earlier, he was reading from the Bible, and all the women of the household have to gather around and listen to him read it. Okay? He's somebody in the government. So look at that. You can see how He's really much a hypocrite. I took the magazine from him and turned it the right way around. They were again the images of my childhood, bold, striding, confident, their arms flung out as if to claim space, their legs apart, feet planted squarely in the earth. So you see the feminist mindset. Not like casual, graceful, closed legs, like present, but just like, oh, I'm a ballerina. Instead of it's like a boss babe, like, you can see the energy. That's why these ladies should be handmaids and taken back to the Red Center. There was something Renaissance about this pose, but it was priceless. It was princes I thought of, not coiffured and ringlet maidens, those candid eyes shadowed with makeup. Yes, like the eye of cats, fixed for a pounce. I felt the commander watching me as I turned the pages. I knew I was doing something I shouldn't have been doing, and that he found pleasure in seeing me doing it. So see, bit of weirdness here, a bit of kinkiness of the author coming out. Like, oh, you shouldn't be looking at that, like, but you are. It was so taboo, so forbidden. You can see multiple layers here. I should have felt evil by Aunt Lydia's lights. I was evil, but I didn't feel evil. So you see how she's being feministic here? Oh, well, I'm calling myself evil, but I didn't feel evil. And a feminist will say, looking at a magazine is not a big deal. But if you look at it like, okay, then you'll imitate that woman. Look at the effect of Kylie Jenner and Kim Kardashian and Khloe Kardashian on the masses. And how that has a strong effect. And how Kim can never keep her clothes on. And how the celebrities are always revealing more and more skin. And how women don't want to have kids because they can't afford plastic surgery to fix their body back to how it was pre-kids. Because they want to be able to look like the ladies in the magazine. I recall they started to want to put age, you had to be 16 or older to use social media because they were finding out that young girls were looking at these ladies who have Photoshop, AI images, heavily curated, manicured angles of themselves, lots of makeup, different lighting, and then these girls get low self-esteem because they're looking at an image that isn't real. It's an altered image. And what that woman looks like with her hair messy with no makeup on is quite different than with all the 70 pounds of makeup, the lighting, the angles, and the automatic fixing of and airbrushing and all that stuff of the image. So the more you gawk at that, the more you get an evil eye. The more you measure people by their beauty, and the more the women adorn some of themselves concerning allure and aura and all that, the more nasty they become. That's to the point where they call themselves goddesses. The arrogance, the haughtiness, the vanity. And so when you go down that slippery slope, and indeed the slope is slippery, you can see where it leads to. What women will do for attention, to try to feel like the most prettiest face in the room forever. Madonna and Joanne Rivers will consistently mutilate their face with plastic surgery till they look like a freak. Because they don't want to age. And they don't want to age with grace. Okay? And then she mentions here, what was he going to give me next? A girdle? So here you see the kinkiness coming again through the author. The sort of power porn play. Okay, feminists do this a lot. Where it's like, oh, the slave and the master, I'm so oppressed. And then they tell women, don't get married. But if you read what they actually write, their perverted brains spew their inner thoughts everywhere. But they mask it as sort of art. It's just the hypocrisy is astounding. It's astounding. Why do you have this? I asked him. Some of, he said, retain an appreciation for old things. But these were supposed to have been burned, I said. There were house-to-house searches, bonfires. So here again you see the security, what I mentioned earlier. So, other page she mentioned magazines being destroyed. She hints at it again. House-to-house searches. Alright? Now, imagine if there was a house-to-house search for adult magazines. Back in the 90s, or in the early 2000s when they were popular. And such materials was outlawed. Men, in mass, would covet these things even though they claimed to hate the horror. And wives would call it extreme even though they hate the horror. Isn't that interesting? They would say, like when women, I shared a post on my community tab not too long ago. A woman was crying because her husband had liked a bikini thirst trap picture on Instagram. But these women, if the government took away adult content, they would say the government is being oppressive. But when their man looks, they feel the man is only at fault. When the woman creates that content, they call her empowered. They don't call her a homewrecker. And they tell you don't judge her, but to judge your husband. And then cry because your feelings got hurt because he looked at someone who was a different type of attraction than you. So way you look at it, these feminist women, they're inconsistent. They don't want the content to be banned, but they don't want their husband to look. And they expect him not to look even though it's in his face. You know, you just can't. You can't win with these ladies. And so, when a woman is reading this, like, why would they go house to house searching for magazines? A lot of those magazines are good enough for men to still choke the chicken to. And women covet and look at, oh, I want that, I want this, I want that. They become more vain and materialistic. Okay. Now she mentions here, like, why did he show it to me? And then she mentions how, well, who else could he show it to? You know. And then she mentions, I knew I was dispensable. Nevertheless, I said too softly, how about your wife? He seemed to think about that. No, he said, she wouldn't understand. Anyway, she wouldn't talk to me much anymore. We don't seem to have much in common these days. So there it is, out in the open. His wife didn't understand him. That's what I was there for then. The same old thing. It was too banal to be true. So, I want you to pause for a second. The feminists like depicting housewives as miserable old saggedy wenches, okay, who their husbands are forced to go to adult entertainers. And adult entertainers will say the amount of men who do pillow talk with them and confess things is very high. And here we see the handmaid is placed in a position just like the sex worker is. Like, poor guy, he's neglected by his wife, so he has to go to the second mistress. And the handmaidens are not exactly a mistress, but they get to have relations with them. And they're younger than the wife. You see? If you tell a feminist men are attracted to younger women, they call you a pig. Yet in this book, this author writes a female character who is younger and who gets pillow talk from a disgruntled husband who has an old wife. You see? It's funny. Feminists, if you tell this to them, they'll call you a misogynist and a sexist, but they put it into their own books, thus reiterating the stereotype. On the third night, I asked him for some hand lotion. I didn't want to sound begging, but I wanted what I could get. Some what, he said, courteous as ever. He was across the desk from me. He didn't touch me much, except for that one obligatory kiss. No pawing, no heavy breathing, none of that. It would have been out of place, somehow, for him as well as for me. Hand lotion, I said. Or face lotion. Our skin gets very dry. For some reason, I said our instead of my. I would have liked to ask also for some bath oil. And those little colored globules you used to be able to get, that were so much like magic to me when they existed in the round glass bowl in my mother's bathroom at home. So here you see what she's doing here is the handmaidens are deprived of lotion, and this is to show like you're not allowed to be comfortable in your position. Now the handmaidens don't get lotion, but the wives get wine. You see, so you can see the meanness. Remember, she would stuff butter in her shoe and use that, animal fat. Beef tallow, great moisturizer. Butter, you do what you can get because it's got the butter fat in it, so you're able to. And there's some lotions made from goat milk and cow milk to make your skin soft. Some women were able to soak in milk, their feet in milk, their hands in milk. You'll see milk bar soaps, oat milk, different types of milks that are very soft on the skin. So dairy butter ain't too far off from that. But she's bartering with him now. And then he tells her, we use butter, I said, when we can get it, or margarine. A lot of the time it's margarine. Butter, he said, musing. That's very clever. Butter, he laughed. I could have slapped him. I think I could get some of that, he said, as if indulging a child's wish for bubble gum. But she might smell it on you. I wonder if this fear of his came from past experiences. Long past, lipstick on the collar, perfume on the cuffs, a scene. Late at night, in some kitchen or bedroom, a man devoid of such experience wouldn't think of that, unless he's craftier than he looks. Exactly. So here you see, she's starting to see who he really is, and the feminist author has a point here. Like, oh, she may smell it on you. So he figures out ways that he could sneak behind his wife's back, breaking the rules of Gilead, of his position, leading the handmaid astray, scorning his wife, not living up to his wedding vows, going out the performative actions of the handmaids. So, the aunts do go through a lot of work to make the handmaids fearful of breaking the rules. And here you have a commander encouraging rule breaking. But he has experience. As we know, later on we learn he's done this before. Okay? And he's a tricky bastard. I'd be careful, I said. Besides, she's never that close to me. Sometimes she is, he said. I looked down, and I had forgotten about that during the ceremony. I could feel myself blushing. I won't use lotion on those nights, I said. On the fourth evening, he gave me the hand lotion in an unlabeled plastic bottle. It wasn't very good quality. It smelled faintly of vegetable oil. No lily of the valley for me. It may have been something they made up for use in hospitals or bed sores, but I thanked him anyway. So, on bed sores, it's like, it's not that, it's like watery. Not that great. The trouble is, I said, I don't have anywhere to keep it. In your room, he said, as if it were obvious. They find it, I said. Someone would find it. Why? He asked, as if he really didn't know. Maybe he didn't. It wasn't the first time he gave evidence of being truly ignorant of the real conditions under which we lived. So here, they get the feminist tone. Men don't understand what we women go through. This also hints at, to me when I read it, when women suffer with postpartum, that the fathers don't really understand the mental load, the emotional baggage that their women go through that makes them fall deeper and deeper into misery. Okay. And then this also aims at how a feminist would say men in power in the patriarchy don't understand the struggles of the female slave. So you can see a lot coming from this author in terms of how she frames things and whatnot. They look, I said. They look in all our rooms. What for? He said. I think I lost control then a little. Razor blades, I said, books, writing, black market stuff, all the things we aren't supposed to have. Jesus Christ, you ought to know. My voice was angrier than I intended, but she didn't even wince. So, she's like, she kind of broke protocol. You know, she's out here getting stern with the boss, but he's just like not even registering it. Then you have to keep it here, he said. So that's what I did. He watched me smoothing over my hands, then my face, with the same air of looking it through the bars. And so then she mentions just how he watched her. And so you can see the eroticism this author puts in the book, turning every mundane thing into eroticism. There's two ways you can look at that, through the perspective of a man and for the perspective of a very kinky woman. But also even a third one where you could say, hey, what would a woman who is actually modest feel about this? But like someone who actually had a good heart and wasn't as mean-spirited and skanky as our main character, right? Now we're in part 26. Oh, wait, hold on. Okay. This is the ceremony night. They keep the lights on. There wasn't really supposed... There was overhead lights. There were harsh lights. So there's not an air of eroticism. And it's just something for fertilization. Like bees to a flower, she mentions. And then she mentions here, Serena Joy had changed for me too. Once I'd merely hated her for her part in what was being done to me, and because she hated me too and resented my presence. And because she would be the one to raise my child, should I be able to have one after all. But now, although I still hated her, no more so than when she was gripping my hand so hard that her rings bit my flesh, pulling my hands back as well, which she must have done on purpose to make me as uncomfortable as she could, the hatred was no longer pure and simple. Partly I was jealous of her. But how could I be jealous of a woman so obviously dried up and unhappy? You can only be jealous of someone who has something you think you ought to have yourself. Nevertheless, I was jealous. So here, you see the insaneness of women. Okay? She's jealous. This is why when I tell you, I say like how to get over your jealousy, your petty jealousies. If the world was ruled by women's jealousy, it would be despotic, because there's no rational order to it, and women rarely talk about how their petty jealousy makes no sense at all. Okay. She makes fun of with Serena Joy, which breaks her down. Has a cane, chain smoker, very unwell. Obviously, her husband and her aren't close, and she doesn't enjoy the ceremony. She's not some kinky cougar, right? She's not a kinky cougar cuck. You know, you can just see that she's kind of old and sophisticated in a way where she's like, this is just the way it is, and so just got to get it done. But still, you would think that since she's going to be the one to raise the child, the handmaid would do well not to make the wife an enemy. Because if you hate the handmaid and then you see the child, you'll hate that child like how Catelyn Stark hated Jon Snow. You know, you want someone to be compassionate to your child. If you knew you was going to have to leave your child with this woman, you would think she would be smart enough to want to be nice and polite and cordial and indifferent for the safety of her child. Because if you make the wife your enemy and then you hand your child over to your enemy to raise, you're a damn idiot. Okay? But the handmaids ain't too smart. You know? If she should have chose to be a Martha, to be quite honest with you. Okay? But I also felt guilty about her. I felt I was an intruder in a territory that ought to have been hers. Now that I was seeing him the commander, on the sly, if only to play his games and listen to him talk. Our functions were no longer as separate as they should have been in theory. I was taking something away from her, although she didn't know it. I was filching. Never mind that it was something she apparently didn't want or had no use for, had rejected even. Still, it was hers. And if I took it away, this mysterious it, I couldn't define. For the commander wasn't in love with me. I refused to believe he felt anything for me as extreme as that. What would be left for her? Why should I care? I told myself. She's nothing to me. She dislikes me. She'd have me out of the house in a minute. Of course. See how she puts herself as the victim? She'd kick me out if she had the chance. Wait a minute, little feminist. You don't like polygamy. You want monogamy. If you were the wife, would you be kind to the handmaid or cruel? Come now. And see, remember, to entertain herself, she's mean in her head about Serena Joy. So, she's jealous of her, but expects Serena Joy to be nice to her. She mocks her in her head, but expects Serena Joy to be nice to her. You're breaking the rules with the commander, okay? But you don't want her to kick you out. You see that? But do you see how the main character always puts herself as the victim? Totally ignoring her free will. Yeah, there's coercion and some pressure, but you still made the choice. You know? She can't just say, hey, if I was the wife, I'd want me out of the house too. Instead, she's like, why should I shouldn't care if I hurt her because she'd want to kick me out. You're sitting there thinking all this evil stuff in your head about her, but then you want her to like you? Dummy, this is just an idiot. She could think up any excuse at all if she were to find out. For instance, he wouldn't be able to intervene to save me. The transgressions of women in the household, whether Martha or handmaid, are supposed to be under the jurisdiction of the wives alone. She was a malicious and vengeful woman. I knew that. Nevertheless, I couldn't shake it. That small compunction towards her. Vengeful woman. Malicious and vengeful. Well, look how this character talked about Janine. Look how she admires Moria. Moria's malicious. Moria's vengeful. Right? Moria tied up an aunt and left out. Moria is a gross New York City style feminist, like a Shiv Roy from Succession, a spoiled slut. You know, that's exactly what she admires in Moria. Also, I now had power over her, a kind, although she didn't know it, and I enjoyed that. See? Why pretend? I enjoyed it a lot. You see? Oh, she'd kick me out. But I enjoy having power, and I enjoyed being... See, she says, I feel guilty, and then she says she enjoys it. You see it? See that? And not only that, I enjoyed it a lot. Double underline that, because I already have annotations in here. But just think about that. So, how are you the victim, lady? Oh, Serena Joy is a vengeful woman. Meanwhile, a couple lines later, I enjoy having that power over Serena Joy. That I'm breaking the rules and seeing her husband outside of the rules of Gilead, outside of my training. See that? Is our main character as moral and a victim as she pretends? Oh, it's okay because she's an oppressed in a position. Reminds me of that post I just did on my community tab, where a feminist said a woman can cheat if her husband's abusive. And it's like, can a man cheat if his wife's abusive? No! The feminists always have double standards. They don't actually want equality. They want preferential treatment. They don't want to be held to the same standards. But the commander could give me away so easily. By a look, by a gesture. some tiny slip that would reveal to anyone watching that there was something between us now. He almost did it the night of the ceremony. He reached his hand up as if to touch my face. I moved my head to the side to warn him away, hoping Serena Joy hadn't noticed, and he withdrew his hand again, withdrew into himself and his single-minded journey. So you see how that single-minded journey, so she's pointing out how he was breaking protocol so openly, even though it would risk her being sent to the colonies. So the commander is selfish because he's betraying his wife, breaking the rules of Gilead, and breaking his duties, his obligations to his order, as in his position and placement in society. Okay, he's not upholding the rules, and he's leading the handmaid astray. Single-minded, that's for sure. Don't do that again, I said to him the next time we were alone. Do what? He said. Try to touch me like that when she's there. Did I? He said. You could get me transferred, I said, to the colonies. You know that, or worse. I thought he should continue to act in public as if I were a large vase or a window, part of the background, and inanimate or transparent. So here again, oh, you objectify me. Women are objectified by men. You know, we're just decorations, ornamentations. And then the feminists, well, just, in this dystopian society, I need to be in the background and inanimate and transparent in order for the wife not to go insane. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to, but I find it... What? I said. He didn't go on. We know. Impersonal, he said. And then, so you see how she's trying to make the connection now between them? The other woman. You know? I'll pause here, because then it gets pretty good. Because we're already at 56. Now... I hope that you can see the feministic leanings. And there's different factions. Rad femmes, libertine feminists. All evil, in my opinion. But through their writings, you see a different part of them. Because even in fiction, the author is putting a bit of themselves into the character. And it was their brain who sculpted this reality. And through that, we can see what it is that they focus on, what it is their mind gravitates to, what messages they are sending without revealing too much, right? So, The Handmaid's Tale is one where we can dissect it very deeply, as we are doing, alhamdulillah, and break down the hypocrisy of women, the duality of women, and the slandering of religions. And I really hope that maybe one day I can write a book, but instead of it being a religion that's bad, showing a woman fighting to maintain her honor and dignity, whereas from the disgusting, hedonistic, materialistic swamp creatures of the atheistic, Darwinistic, moronic cult. Let me know what you think. Be very curious to see. Please like, comment, subscribe, join the blog. Take care.